For a chance to win the iPhone, treats and £15,000 cash, text prize to 63232. Text costs £2 plus one standard network rate message, or post your name and number to GB06 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 5 p.m. on the 28th of June. Full terms and privacy notice at gbnews.com/win. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand. Good luck.
In the GB newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens.
With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK,
GB News brings you accurate reporting of the day's topical agenda.
When the news breaks, wherever and whenever it's happening,
we'll be there.
This is GB News,
the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
Good afternoon, Britain.
Good afternoon, Britain.
Weekdays from midday, we bring you the most compelling stories from across the United Kingdom.
And why it matters to you. From your doorstep to our inbox.
That's right, we want to hear from you. Good afternoon, Britain. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Every Saturday, 10 till 12, we'll bring you all of the news that you need to know. We'll also remind you that there is so much to smile about.
It's my favourite time of the week. I get to relax, enjoy some light-hearted stories and let Ellie teach me about fashion too.
That's Saturday Morning Live, every Saturday, 10 till 12.
Only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Hello there, it's 6 o'clock and I'm Michelle Dewberry. Of course, today's 80 years since D-Day. I've certainly had the tissues out, have you? But I'm asking tonight, do you think enough people appreciate or even understand the sacrifices that were made for us? Also, I want to speak politics tonight. Reform UK are apparently now within 2 points of the Tories. Let's discuss this. Also, carnage this morning after 80 migrants were rescued from the Channel. Let me ask you, do you reckon this is now the start of a summer of chaos? Also, Merseyside police have become the latest force to apologise for historical ill treatment of the LGBTQ+ community. What do you think to this? Apologies for historic acts like this, are they necessary? My panel disagree on that. What says you? Got all of that to come and more. But before we get stuck in, let's cross live for tonight's 6 o'clock news.
Good evening, you're with GB News, and at just after 6 o'clock, our top story. Veterans, senior royals and major political figures are attending events in Normandy in France to mark 80 years since the D-Day landings, the largest amphibious military operation in the history of warfare. His Majesty the King thanked those who'd made it home for their bravery and sacrifice alongside their perished colleagues, while Prince William said everyone involved had been a hero. Today, the dignitaries have been at Omaha Beach, where world leaders have been gathering, including Volodymyr Zelensky, Joe Biden and Emmanuel Macron, all gathering for the international ceremony commemorating British, American and Canadian troops landing on Omaha. Earlier on, veterans could be seen wiping the tears from their eyes as the King addressed those attending the ceremony in France.
It is with the most profound sense of gratitude that we remember them and all those who served at that critical time. We recall the lesson that comes to us again and again across the decades. Free nations must stand together to oppose tyranny.
Well, from France to commemorations here in the UK, which have been taking place across the country. In Lisbon first, in Northern Ireland, let's tell you about the town crier who delivered his D-Day proclamation from the centre of the town. Scunthorpe also marking the anniversary of the largest seaborne invasion in military history, with march pasts in the centre of town and a beacon lighting ceremony planned to take place across Kent tonight. The Princess Royal in London joining Chelsea pensioners at the Royal Chelsea Hospital for a special D-Day event there. And commemorations also taking place in Worksop in Nottinghamshire, where military personnel saluted and lay wreaths to the fallen. Well, as part of an election pledge, the Prime Minister has pledged to boost veteran benefits. Rishi Sunak says he wants to make the UK the best place in the world to have served in the armed forces. The pledge on the 80th anniversary of the D-Day landings includes reducing the price of the Veterans Rail Card and extending existing national insurance relief for employers who hire ex-military personnel. Labour claims the Conservative record on veterans is shameful. The Secretary of State for Work and Pensions, Mel Stride, says it is an important step forward.
We are to be re-elected, and there we'll be looking at further plans and strategic plans that there will be a duty on ministers to come forward with. We're going to be decreasing the cost of the rail card to veterans from £30 to £21. We're going to be extending the national insurance reductions that are available to employers that recruit veterans, for example, where we know we have higher employment rates amongst veterans than we do across the population more generally. So we stand full square with them, and I think this is an important step forward.
But Shadow Defence Secretary John Healey says Labour would go further for veterans.
Unfortunately, the government's created over 14 years of postcode lottery on help for veterans. They've halved the support on employment, and they've allowed veterans' homelessness to rise over the last year, not end it. And there's much more that can be done and needs to be done. We would start by putting fully into law the Armed Forces Covenant. Now, that would reinforce and strengthen the rights of veterans to services and also of service personnel and their families. We'd also legislate in the first year of a Labour government for a new independent Armed Forces Commissioner.
Meanwhile, Liberal Democrats leader Sir Ed Davey said it is critical now to pass on the memory of D-Day to young people.
It's critical we remember them and that we pass that memory on to our children and young people. It was the most important moment in our country's history and I think the world's history. It was a fight for freedom, a fight for democracy. If those brave men and women hadn't fought that day and gone onto those beaches, we might not be having the election at the moment. We might not have the freedoms we enjoy. That's how important it is. And so we must remember them and thank them.
Well, in news away from D-Day commemorations, in the last hour we've heard the very sad news that a body has been recovered in the search for a toddler who fell into the River Soar in Leicester in February. The search was launched to find 2-year-old Zylo Maruziva after he went into the water at Ayleston Meadows. Officers have thanked everyone involved in finding him and are now supporting his family. An urgent health warning has been issued across England after an outbreak of E. coli that's put more than 100 people in hospital. It's being linked to a nationally distributed food item, but mysteriously, the UK Health Security Agency hasn't released the name of the food thought to be responsible. But they do say testing has indicated that most of the 113 cases reported are part of a single outbreak. We're hoping for the identification of exactly what is responsible to come clear this evening. Let me just bring you, before I go, some royal breaking news. Prince Harry has, in the last 20 minutes, been given the green light to go back to the High Court over the Home Office's decision to take away his close protection team, his police protection, when he visits the UK. The Duke of Sussex took legal action against the Home Office after they decided in 2020 he would not automatically receive the same degree of protection as a working royal. But in a statement from his lawyers, we're told Harry hopes he will obtain justice from the Court of Appeal. The case against the government is one of several high-profile legal battles Prince Harry has brought to the High Court in recent years. That's the news. For the latest stories, do sign up to GB News Alert. Scan that QR code on the screen right now or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Thank you very much for that, Polly. I am Michelle Dewberry. I'm with you till 7 o'clock tonight. I can hear some of you at home already shouting at your screen, perhaps, about that Prince Harry update at the end of the bulletins there. What do you make to that? I'm fascinated to hear your thoughts on it. Also, as well, I just want to say, you know, that's really tragic news about that little boy there. We followed that story, of course, when it happened, and he's been missing for such a long time. So, as a mummy myself and parents, many of you at home, you know, you will know the anguish, even when you lose your child just for a split second in a supermarket. So it's absolutely horrendous tragedy what's happened to him, and just a tiny mercy, I guess, if you can call it that he will now be reunited back with his family so that they can say their farewells. I send love and regards and respect to all of his loved ones. Very, very sad indeed. Anyway, look, I'm with you till 7 o'clock tonight. Alongside me, my panel, I've got the former Labour advisor and political commentator, Stella Stantikidou. Did I get that right? How many out of 10 for my pronunciation? 7. I'm going to keep practising as the show goes on. I'm going to try and get myself to a strong 9.5 by the end of the programme. But new face to the show, you're very welcome tonight. Also, alongside, we've got the Professor of Politics and International Relations at the University of Kent, Matt Goodwin. Good evening to you too.
Hi, how you doing?
As is always the case on this programme, it is very much about you guys at home as well. So what is on your mind tonight? You can get in touch with me all the usual ways. You can email gbviews@gbnews.com. You can go to the website, gbnews.com/yoursay, or of course you can tweet or X me wherever you're watching or listening. You are very welcome indeed today. But look, I want to kick off the programme. Of course, the main story in town, because, yes, don't worry, we'll come on to all the politics, we'll come on to law and order and immigration and reform UK, we'll come on to all of that. But I did just want to start the programme by reflecting, of course, on the fact that it is the 80th anniversary of the D-Day landings today. There's been so many events happening. I will confess, many of them have certainly brought a tear to my eye, and I suspect that I'm not alone. We've had the King. He's been speaking as well. Let's take a listen.
It is with the most profound sense of gratitude that we remember them and all those who served at that critical time. We recall the lesson that comes to us again and again across the decades. 3 nations must stand together to oppose tyranny.
Rishi Sunak, of course, our Prime Minister, he also speaking today.
I can guess how they might feel when they hear us applaud their courage. I'm no hero, they will say. I just did my duty. That humility is so much a part of why they are truly the best of us. Each of you who contributed that day, your actions freed a continent and built a better world.
And of course, the most important people in attendance, the actual veterans themselves, so many of those people speaking out today. Listen.
I was in various convoys and saw ships going down.
And to see that so young, it still sticks with you now.
Oh, I just want to climb into this camera and just give him such a massive hug. I mean, can you even imagine, even when you just press pause and you just look at some of the imagery from that event and that occasion, you look at these young men, and some of them, they just look like young boys, and they are just, you know, they are kind of bundled in, and you know, and they must know that what they are about to face as those kind of doors open, it is just shock and horror. And you can see when you talk to those veterans like that, they will never, ever forget it for as long as they live. Also, there's been events here as well in this country. Let me cross live now to Will Hollis. He's been at some of them for us today. Will, bring us up to speed with where you are and what you've been up to.
Yes, well, the national focus is quite rightly across the channel at the events in Normandy, where 80 years ago, young men gave their lives for the freedom that we experience today. But here at local levels, councils and organisations have been making sure that the sacrifice made by those men is not forgotten here on British soil too. And here at Derby Cathedral in a few moments there will be bell ringing. It's going to go on for around 3 hours or so. Music has played such a big role in this act of remembrance 80 years since the D-Day landings, whether it's the bagpipers who have been honouring Bill Millin, who marched up and down Sword Beach armed with nothing but a ceremonial dagger and his pair of bagpipes to rouse the troops, or whether it's the last post that I've been witnessing in Worksop, Nottinghamshire earlier today. Quite the difference between the sounds that those young men would have been hearing as they landed on the beaches in Normandy. And why is it worth remembering, particularly in smaller villages and smaller towns? Well, as I say, I was in Nottinghamshire earlier today and I asked the King's representative, Veronica Pickering, the Lord Lieutenant of Nottinghamshire, why we should be remembering away from the coastline in Normandy, here in the heart of England and the rest of the United Kingdom.
This is where most of those young men and women came from. And the small towns and villages across the UK represented all of us. It wasn't one army from a small place.
Now, at many of these events, there haven't been any D-Day veterans or even Second World War veterans for two reasons, Michelle. Because many of them are, of course, across the Channel, but because there are so few of them left. And that's what makes this 80th anniversary so poignant, because it could quite rightly be the last time that we get a chance to remember and honour what these people did 80 years ago.
Indeed. Well, Hollis, thank you very much for bringing us up to date. Your thoughts, Matt Goodwin?
Well, I think it's very poignant, isn't it? I mean, we still have a direct link to those events through the accounts of the veterans that we can see on our television screens today, and it's probably going to be the last Remembrance Day related to the Second World War. I think the last major Remembrance Day where we will have that direct link. Many of us, of course, have grandfathers, grandmothers who can... Well, I grew up hearing stories about the Second World War. There was a direct link. But kids today, obviously, that's going to become quite a bit weaker, isn't it? It's going to be the great-grandparents who they'll hear about. And there is something about today that I am quite nervous about, which is, you know, we've had a lot of polling this week about how young people think and feel about D-Day. I've done a poll which has found less than half of all British adults know what D-Day refers to, and YouGov yesterday found that over half of Gen Z say they have not much or no knowledge at all about D-Day. And I just wonder, Michelle, these days are really important for our collective memory as a nation, right? It's what makes us who we are. But I'm also wondering, what are we actually teaching kids about these events? I mean, I find those statistics very depressing.
Yeah, and I mean, with all the will in the world, we kind of learn about this stuff at school, don't we? And then you kind of go off on the on your journey of life, and I guess, you know, things get in the way of your good intentions you want to remember. Maybe we need to do more in the public space, actually, constantly. I don't know, more regular events. What do you think? Stella, your thoughts?
I think that the UK, over the last few months, we have been discussing how can British people feel proud about their country in a way that is healthy and good for community. And I think D-Day should be a bank holiday, like it is in other European countries, the relevant holiday. So in Greece, for example, we commemorate World War II with a bank holiday, and you have student marches on the street, which is a very nice, positive way for everyone to learn about this. I think World War II is very important for us to remember, and especially these veterans are incredibly important for us to remember why what they gave their life for. And what they gave their life for is for us to live in the most peaceful era of human history. You are a lot less likely to die from war than you were at any other time in our history.
And let me just bring up some of these images as well, because I mentioned them to you, but I mean, look at these men. I mean, I am going to call them men to be respectful, but, you know, some of these, the teenagers, they're barely embarked on their lives. Can you imagine being either A, those men knowing what you're about to face, or B, what about being their parents? You're waving off your boys, not knowing if you'll ever see them again, often having absolutely no idea at all, in some cases, what happened to them. It's just, I don't know, we've got a suggestion there of a bank holiday. Would you support that? Is that what you think we need in this country to try and kind of bolster memories in people? Judith says, can I just commend GB News on their coverage of D-Day celebrations? You've really enjoyed the coverage today. Jill, you say the same. You found it very emotional. I found it very emotional as well. I'm not much of a crier, but today I have absolutely shed more than a few tears. And, of course, we owe a huge debt of gratitude. And certainly here on GB News, we will never stop talking about our veterans. We hold them in very high regard, and we thank each and every one of them and always will on this channel. Look, I want to talk after the break about politics. Well, how can we not? Reform UK, do you know, they're apparently 2 points now behind the Tories. What do you think to this? What's behind it? Is it Nigel Farage or something else? And is it a good thing or not? I'll see you in 2.
This is GB News, Britain's news channel.
D-Day was shrouded in secrecy. Ken Hay was days away from landing in Normandy and still didn't know what was happening.
I don't think we really appreciated what we were going into. Actually, on D-Day, I was on a 30-mile route march, and we see the planes going over and that sort of thing. And we realised that wherever they were going, then we got the news that, in fact, it was Normandy, and we knew we were scheduled for that.
He arrived on Juno Beach at Coursieux-sur-Mer a few days after the main assault. The soldiers' role was to push forward into enemy territory.
I didn't land on D-Day. I landed shortly after in June. I was in the infantry, so I was a rifle and I was up the front.
While on night patrol on July 7th, his unit was attacked.
My brother was a corporal in the same platoon, and he was out with me. He got back. 16 of us out of 30 got back. 5 of us got captured, and 9 got killed.
Germans put him to work in a POW camp in Zabas, Poland. With Soviets advancing, the prisoners were forced to march for 1,000 miles.
At one point along there, my leg was chopped. I lay down in the snow. If it hadn't been for 2 guys who fell back in the column and picked me up, I'd have just gone to sleep and frozen to death. 2 American tanks turned up on the 22nd of April, Sunday afternoon, and we were liberated.
Ken feels pride for the role he played in Normandy and thanks God for keeping him alive.
People say, why did you volunteer for the services? It was a completely different atmosphere then. You did your bit.
The People's Channel.
I'm Michael Portillo. This is GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
We're proud to be GB News, the People's Channel. And as you know, we always love to hear your views. Now, there's a new way of getting in touch with us at gbnews.com/yoursay. By commenting, you can be part of a live conversation and join our GB News community. You can even talk to me, Bev Turner, or any of the members of the GB News family.
Join me, Nana Akwe, for an informative, interactive news programme with a difference. It's fun.
It's true. You're not wrong. No one will be cancelled.
Lovely. Join me from 3 p.m. every weekend, only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
I'm Mark Dolan, and this is GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello everyone, I'm Michelle Dewberry, keeping you company until 7 o'clock tonight. Alongside me, I've got my panel, the former Labour advisor and political commentator Stella Stadakidou and the Professor of Politics and International Relations at the University of Kent, Matt Goodwin. Welcome back, everybody. Well, let's talk politics then, shall we? Because it is more bad news today for the Tory party, because according to YouGov polling and other bits and pieces I've seen as well, apparently now it looks like the Tories could very soon slip behind Reform UK. Look, let's just get straight into this debate, Matt Goodwin. Your thoughts on this?
We are approaching a watershed moment in British politics. I mean, if Reform draw level with the Conservatives in the polling, if they even push ahead of the Conservatives in the polling, we're going to see something that we've really not seen before in this country. Yes, you might say the Brexit Party polled well in the spring of 2019 amid all the Brexit chaos, but let me tell you, there's something more fundamental going on here. I think the Tories are rapidly facing an extinction-level event. They've only got 4 weeks to turn this around. Nigel Farage is clearly enjoying a boost in the polling. He's taking about 35 to 40% of 2019 Conservatives. Rishi Sunak, most of the polling suggests, is having a bad campaign. So here's my question. What happens, Michelle, if Reform start pulling ahead of the Conservatives in the polls? I mean, what happens to all those MPs thinking about defecting? What happens to the donors who are thinking about giving Reform big money? What happens to all the voters out there in the country who say, hang on a minute, suddenly Reform looks like a credible alternative? Then actually, I think all bets are off. This election could get really exciting.
Stella?
I do think it could be a Canada 1993 situation. A lot of people have been talking about this. This is when the Canadian Conservative Party completely got eviscerated and the Liberals in Canada got a massive majority. There are some things that have changed from last year. We now know that there are a lot more young people, there are a lot more Zoomers who are more authoritative than they used to be.
Tell people what a Zoomer is.
A Zoomer, so I'm a millennial, I'm 29, and I'm a young millennial. Anyone younger than me who is an adult is a Zoomer. That's the generation of Zoomers.
Right.
So it's the younger generation, the new blood. And people always think that young people are left-wing. You know, when you are young, you're a liberal. If you are young and you're not a left-wing, then you don't have a heart. If you're older and you're not a conservative, then you don't have a brain. But this is not actually the case. This didn't always used to be the case, in the UK especially. So now we are seeing that the young vote has completely collapsed for the Conservatives. And that's because they have completely disappointed them on very important issues for them, such as housing, for example. Nobody can get on the housing ladder. And so Reform has a very, very good chance of overtaking them and becoming the second party.
Can I just briefly on that, because I completely agree. And speaking as what's classified as a geriatric millennial, born in 1981, I think what's really interesting here is there's a kind of Tory elite class, people who are writing about Reform, who don't quite get Reform. So what they're saying is, well, you know, Nigel Farage is terrible, a vote for Reform is a vote for Labour. And what they're not reflecting on is what the Conservative Party has done to the country over the last 14 years, including those Gen Z Zoomers. Because I keep meeting young people in Westminster who are saying, hang on a minute, why would I vote Conservative? They gave us mass immigration on steroids. They made the housing crisis worse. They didn't really level up the country. They certainly didn't control the borders. They've not given me a stake in this system on any meaningful level. And to make it worse, they've kind of laughed at everybody who's voting for Farage like they laughed for everybody who was voting for Brexit. So I actually think the sort of Tory elite class here is really out of touch with who's voting for them. And that's going to be really problematic for Rishi Sunak and the party. Well, they can't. It's too late. It's too late. The Tories are finished at this election. It's over. They're averaging 24% of the vote, Michelle.
I could tell you, any Tory that would be sitting on this panel right now, they would be pushing back very hard. I had Bill Cash out on here, actually. Was it, when was that, Monday? You tell me at home. I think it was Monday. He was on here. He was absolutely resolute that the Tories will, you know, continue. They will prevail. Don't believe it is as bad as what you're saying.
They might continue, but they're not going to win this election. Labour's going to win the biggest majority, I think, probably since 1997. And the reality of that is, they're going to win that, not because people are falling in love with the Labour Party, but because people really dislike the Tories.
Well, what about George Galloway's Workers' Party then? Because there's a lot of people. Well, there's a lot of people actually that would sit there and say that Labour's got a problem when it comes to the Israel-Gaza situation. People like George Galloway are very vocal about that. They would say that they are the party that truly, represent the working class, especially for those people that are very concerned about the situation in Gaza.
Where has George Galloway been in the last few days? I haven't seen him around. The thing is, George Galloway is a completely fringe politician. He has even less support than the Green Party. He's nowhere to be seen, and I do not think that he has a bigger base other than disgruntled minority voters who he panders to, and he tries to pretend that he's on their side.
But look, just briefly on that, Galloway's not the only problem facing Labour. I agree he's a minor problem. There's another dynamic to this. I think reform are actually going to be a problem for Labour. And I think, here's a prediction, the morning after the general election, I think we'll wake up and we'll all be seeing just how many second places reform have in Labour seats. A little bit like 2015, when Nigel Farage and UKIP had 120 second place finishes. If Farage actually gets this right, he'll be able to say the day after the election, not only am I in Clacton, and not only maybe is Richard Tice elected in Boston and Skegness, let's see, but reform is now second in 100, 150 seats across the Red Wall in parts of Wales. And this is where it gets interesting, not 2024, but 28, 29, when actually you start to see Labour facing serious opposition from reform, not the Tories.
Yes, highly unlikely that in this election reform will be able to make a dent on the Labour Party, because prior to the new reform leadership, there were only 7 constituencies across all polling where reform was polling second. And as a result, likely to get a parliamentary seat. And obviously, then organising their field games, their data is not yet there for them to be able to get out the vote. But when you look online, you can see that very clearly. Reform's game plan is not to have the best constituency organising in the same traditional way that the Labour Party does, for example. They are looking at social media. They are looking to make this a cultural issue, and they are looking to inspire people with all of these new types of social media, like TikTok videos that make it look cool. But the issue is that they are not going to tackle the actual problems, and that is my worry about the Labour Party, that we will be distracted by the one issue, single issue that the Reform Party has, which is immigration, and this is not the biggest issue for our problems in this country. So this is what I'm afraid.
Is that not it's not a real issue?
No, it is not immigration. Immigration is not our biggest issue.
Well, we're going to be talking about that issue after the break. Let me just clarify something, because a few people are getting in touch saying that you celebrated, apparently, the assault on Nigel
I did, and people don't know what get the bag means. So I posted a tweet after the Sun editor, Harry Cole, exposed this young woman for being an OnlyFans girl, for having an OnlyFans account. And there were all of these people gleefully shaming her for having an OnlyFans account. And can I just say, young girls, if you're watching this, I do not think you should have an OnlyFans account. I don't think it's a good idea. I definitely do not condone you assaulting politicians, throwing milkshakes on people.
Good.
But get the bag means basically, girl, get the money, because you know what's going to have so many OnlyFans subscribers now that Harry Cole tweeted that. So that was it. It was a joke. Don't be so sensitive, right-wing people. It's okay if you want to make jokes about us left-wing women, when you have to take it the other way as well.
What a life to aspire to as a young woman, selling pictures of your bits for a couple of quid. Ugh, it's not for me, I can tell you. Anyway, look, I do just have to tell you, read out a candidate list as well, because we have just been mentioning Clacton. Of course, you've got Jiravan Owosu Nepal from Labour, Giles Watling from Conservative, Matthew Benislam from Lib Dems, Nigel Farage from Reform, Natasha Osben from the Green Party. Well, there you go. We've just touched on that I-word, immigration. We're going to revisit that after the break. I can tell you these two completely disagree. I'll see you in 2.
Hello and welcome to your evening GB News weather forecast brought to you by the Met Office. So some rain and showers around, particularly for northern areas tonight, but clear spells as well. We've still got low pressure up to the north of the UK, bringing various secluded fronts across the UK as we go throughout the rest of this evening. But looking at the detail, any showers across England and Wales will slowly fizzle out this evening, leaving plenty of clear spells. That's going to help those temperatures drop into the low single figures, and we could even see a touch of grass frost in some rural spots tonight. Across northwest Scotland, though, there's a band of heavy rain making its way southeastwards as we go into the early hours of Friday. And along with this, we will see some quite strong blustery winds. So it'll make for quite a wet commute across much of Scotland on Friday morning, with that heavy rain making its way southeastwards, feeling pretty chilly in those blustery winds as well. As we look further south, we have got some clearer skies to start the day, so some brightness, particularly further south across southeast England, but also a few showers, particularly across the southwest, and they will make their way southeastwards as we go through Friday morning. That band of rain across Scotland will also make its way southeastwards into England as we go into Friday afternoon, fizzling out a little bit and just breaking up into showers as it makes its way southeastwards, but introducing a bit more in the way of cloud into parts of England and Wales. Heavy and frequent showers, though, developing behind this across northwest Scotland. We could see a bit of hail and the odd rumble of thunder in those, but feeling pretty pleasant further south with highs of 18 to 20. Now, if we look at what this weekend has to bring, a bit more in the way of cloud to start the weekend on Saturday compared to what we're going to see on Friday morning. It's not quite as chilly a start. A few showers to start the day, but generally clearing away to the southeast into the early afternoon, and further frequent heavy showers across Scotland, and that will continue throughout the weekend, but some uncertainty as we head into the new week.
The latest GB News travel.
Good evening, I'm Johnny Ratner. On the M56 in Greater Manchester, one lane is out of action heading westbound to the Manchester Airport turnoff. Junction 5, a car is broken down, blocking off the left lane, and there are long delays heading north up the M6 through the West Midlands tonight from junction 8 to 9, that's between the M5 interchange and the Wednesbury turnoff. A car transporter has broken down in the two left lanes. Long queues back to Spaghetti towards Birmingham and back onto the northbound M5. On the Surrey stretch of the M25, there are anti-clockwise queues after a lorry broke down between Leatherhead and Reigate. It's now been recovered. In West Sussex at Littlehampton, the A284 Wick Street blocked southbound at Courtwick Road just south of the A259 following an accident. And on public transport in London, severe delays on the Elizabeth line from Whitechapel and Shenfield following a track fall to Ilford. That's the latest.
You can stay up to date throughout the day by visiting our website, gbnews.com.
Hello there, I'm Michelle Dewberry with you till 7 o'clock tonight. Alongside me, my panel women, I've got the former Labour advisor and political commentator Stella Stansgadidou and the professor. I think I've got worse actually as the programme's gone.
5 out of 10.
I was doing so well. I started at 7, I think I peaked at a 9, I think I've just gone down to about a 4. The Professor of Politics and International Relations at the University of Kent, Mark Goodwin. Look, 80 migrants were rescued earlier on today after a boat got into difficulty crossing the Channel. I've got to say, you know, one of those people on the boat was a 6-month-old baby. Why on earth would anyone, and I have to caveat this, who is safe in France, risk the life of a 6-month-old baby on that journey across the Channel? Anyway, what do you make to all this, Matt Goodwin?
Well, we need to solve the crisis, and the way we solve the crisis is through keeping the legislation we've already got. We need the illegal migration bill, and we need an active third country deterrent. That's the only thing that's going to stop people from actually risking their lives in the Channel. And then we need to leave the European Convention on Human Rights, or at least ignore some of the ECHR rulings. And then we probably also need to reform things like the Human Rights Act, because I don't want anybody dying in the Channel. Now, what Labour's going to do, made it very clear, Labour's going to repeal the Illegal Migration Act, going to overturn Rwanda, and it's going to send a big, loud message to every would-be illegal migrant and people smuggler around the world. Britain is open for business, and we're going to have more children dying in the Channel, more illegal migrants dying in the Channel, and it will be on Labour's hands. We need to solve the crisis as quickly as possible.
Stella?
You think it's good value for money, paying millions of pounds? to a foreign government to get rid of literally a handful of people. It will be like less than 2% of asylum seekers.
125,000 people is a handful of people.
Yes.
125,000 lives.
You think we should spend millions of pounds? We should give millions of pounds. We should hand them over to Rwanda. You don't think we have other things to spend that money on?
How much are we spending a year on the illegal migration crisis?
How much are we? I don't know.
£4 billion every year.
Cool, okay, and you think that this is going to solve it then?
I think you cannot solve this crisis without an active third country deterrent.
Does the fact that we spend so much money not tell you something about how dysfunctional the system that the current government has in place?
I agree with you on that.
This is a conservative government that has been in place for 15 years.
I agree with you.
And they are saying that they are going to reduce immigration. They have been saying that for 15 years. So the fact that we're spending so much money, what does that tell you? Does it tell you that there is a magic solution to solve our immigration, our illegal immigration problem, which is different from a legal immigration problem, and they're just not pulling the levers? Is that what it's telling you? No. It is telling you that immigration is a very, very complex issue, that the Conservative government has been lying about it. It tells you also that they are completely useless and they have failed to deal with this.
I agree.
But as I said before, my biggest issue with this is that we are talking about immigration over and over again, and guess what? You can reduce immigration to zero tomorrow. Our problems are not going to be better. In fact, they could very well be worse.
When you say problems, what do you mean? Do you live in an area that has been changed by uncontrolled immigration?
I live in London. I used to live in my land, which probably has changed with immigration. Well, I'm an immigrant, so you are asking me if I live in an area that has been changed by immigration. Well, I'm an immigrant, so I don't know, maybe I've changed my area. I hope for the better.
Just briefly come in, because I think the one thing the British people deserve above everything is secure borders and the ability of their government to control who is coming in and out of their country, which is their home. So that's the starting point for all of this. Immigration matters to people because, look, Thomas Sowell once said it's the only issue that we talk about in terms of how to help people break the law. And people find that very annoying. We constantly talk about how to make it easier for illegal migrants to enter the country, and we know that that comes with serious costs, like the girls who are being sexually harassed in places like Kent, like the girls who are sexually exploited in northern towns. And I think people have had enough, and I agree with you. The Conservatives have been disastrous on this issue. I've talked and written endlessly about how terrible the Conservatives have been on illegal and legal migration. But Labour aren't going to solve it either. And the reason that Nigel Farage and Reform are doing so well is because everybody out there can see that on this issue they are consistently being misled by the two big parties. That's the reality of this situation. I don't want children dying like the 9-year-old, right? I have a daughter, OK? I don't want the 9-year-old young girls being killed on their way across the Channel. We need an active deterrent, like Australia had, like Germany.
Trampled on, by the way, by other people in the boat. What a
trampled on by illegal migrants, men who didn't actually defend the little girl on the boat. Why is Germany talking about a third country deterrent? Why is Austria? Why is Italy? Why are many other Western countries now realising that mass uncontrolled migration is a complete disaster, including left-wing politicians in places like Sweden, who have now said, we don't really want migrant gangs running around downtown Stockholm setting off bombs. I don't think the left are realistic on this issue.
Matt, I'm completely realistic about immigration, and we can talk about the downsides for sure. I just simply believe that the most important policy issues for the UK right now is you need to build more houses, you need to deal with our crumbling infrastructure, you need to manage our failing public services, the NHS that is completely dysfunctional. You need to have energy security, and you need to deal with the cost of living crisis. And unless you deal with all of these issues, you're not going to deal with
so take housing. Take housing.
No,
one
take
example.
Housing. Who's going to build all of these new houses? The problem with housing is not that you have too many people. You don't have enough workers, and you don't have enough houses. Why do you not have enough houses? Why haven't we had all of these years of 15 years of Conservative government planning reform to allow us to build as many houses as we need for our young people? This is the question I want to answer, not whether there are too many immigrants.
So I think
if they're going to come here and become construction workers...
Answer then.
Yeah, so take housing as an example. I agree with you. The Conservatives have been terrible, that we need to change planning, we need to build more homes. But let's be realistic. We built 190,000 homes last year, right? And the government target's 300,000. On current trends, with the levels of migration we have now, we need to build 550,000 homes every year. We're basically 4 million homes short of what we need in order to keep up with the immigration-driven pressure. Now,
immigration needs to come down.
So you agree? Okay. Yeah. So when you say things like, well, why are we talking about immigration? We should be talking about housing. Or why are you talking about immigration? We should be talking about public services. Every major Western nation currently, from Canada to Sweden, is realising that the population trap of welcoming more and more people, by the way, who also get old, who also need the NHS, who also need housing, who also need public services, is leading Western nations into disaster. You can't say, if we talk about immigration, we're not talking about these issues. They're all interlinked. What we need to do is get migration back down to a reasonable level. And then I agree with you, change things like planning, build more homes, reform the NHS. Of course they are. Everything we're living through in this country right now is a policy choice, a disastrous policy choice, first taken by Tony Blair in 2004, and then carried on by David Cameron, and then, by the way, by Boris Johnson, who completely liberalised migration and put it on steroids. These all reflect policy choices. We could make a different choice tomorrow. We could say we're going to reduce legal migration below 100,000, we're going to leave the ECHR, we're not going to have children and adults dying in the Channel. We could make that choice if we wanted. Our elites, our ruling class, are refusing to make that choice.
Well, there you go. What do you make to all of that? Very strong opinions on here, and I know that you will have equally strong opinions at home. Get in touch and tell me your thoughts. I've got to just say, though, we were just talking about the Reform UK Party. One of my members on the panel mentioned the candidate there that's standing in Boston and Skegness. I do just want to be clear, of course, other candidates are standing in that seat. As the list stands currently, they are as follows: David Dickinson, English Democrats, Alex Forbett from Labour, Richard Gordon Lloyd from the Lib Dems, Chris Moore from the Green Party, and of course Richard Tice just mentioned that from Reform. We've got Matt Warman as well from the Conservatives. Get your thoughts coming into me in all the usual ways on that last topic. I'd love to know what you think, if anyone actually has got the answer to this issue, and if so, what you reckon it is. Tell me your thoughts coming up after the break. Do you think our police forces should be apologising for historical ill treatments? Tell me. See you in 2.
GB News Breakfast, every day from 6 a.m.
Joint CEO at the UK Sepsis Trust, Dr. Ron Daniels. Very good to see you this morning. Why is it with sepsis we sort of hear very little about it in day-to-day life until there's either a big story or a big tragedy? Why is that? Is it common?
Well, it's astonishing, isn't it? We have a condition here that affects nearly 250,000 people across the UK each year and claims 48,000 lives. And just for context, breast cancer, and I'm not diminishing how horrible that can be, claims 11,000 lives. So sepsis is 4 times more prolific as a killer. I think the reason we don't hear about it is because it doesn't really belong to any particular speciality of doctors. It touches every aspect of healthcare, and therefore there's no professional group to be championing it, which means it needs an advocacy organisation like ours.
My understanding is that it's when your own immune system starts to attack the tissues, but by the time people realise that their temperature isn't just flu or something, they can often be in quite a perilous state.
It arises in people of any age, people with whether or not they've got underlying illness, and it can arise as a consequence of any infection. So it presents hugely differently.
So what do we do?
If you're concerned something is devastatingly wrong, there are 6 key symptoms to look for, and they spell the word sepsis. S for slurred speech or confusion. E for extreme pain in the muscles or joints. P for passing no urine, no water in a day. S for severe breathlessness. I for it feels like I'm going to die, and people really do say that. And then the final S for skin that's mottled or discoloured or very pale. Any one of those 6 in the context of infection, it goes straight to A&E.
The People's Channel.
is GB News, and we are Britain's election channel.
This vote may seem to be about the politicians and the media, but it's actually about you. We won't forget that.
Join us up and down the country as we follow every moment together.
More than ever, it's important to hear all sides
as you make your decision in the run-up to polling day.
This is GB News,
the People's Channel.
Britain's election channel.
Are the newspapers getting you down?
My wife didn't divorce me that month.
Struggling to separate the wheat from the chaff?
I know that it's a bit of a circus at the best of times.
Well, don't worry. Headliners has got you covered. We'll take the burden of reading the day's news, and if we get depressed, who cares? It's an occupational hazard, frankly. That's Headliners on GB News from 11 p.m. till midnight, and the following morning, 5 till 6 a.m. on GB News, the comedy channel. Nah, just kidding. Britain's news channel.
Hello everyone, I'm Michelle Dewberry with you till 7 o'clock tonight. Alongside me, my panel remain, and the conversation, I can tell you, continued in the break about that topic about immigration. Stella was basically saying she thinks that so many other things are much more important, things like energy security. And there was a suggestion that this conversation, the focus on immigration, is perhaps somewhat xenophobic.
Not necessarily that. That's not exactly what I said. What I believe is that it's in the human nature to either be afraid of difference or to actively dislike difference. And then obviously there are people who have different values, and it's very normal to have your values and to prefer your values and your way of life. I like my way of life. Obviously, I think my way of life is better. I think everyone should adopt it. Because I'm a Democrat, I don't expect everyone to do that. And there is nothing I can do. I'm not going to go and legislate for people to like, everyone is going to need to become a Greek Orthodox Christian because I'm a Greek Orthodox Christian. So what I'm saying is, I understand when culturally people are opposed to a lot of immigration. I completely understand and I see the bad effect too much uncontrolled immigration can have on a community, how it can change its characters, and I do think we should be careful. This is why, for example, one policy that I'm in favor of is telling to legal migrants, look, you can come to this country, but you cannot go and live in London. You have to go and live somewhere else.
Oh, lovely. Yeah. There you go. I can hear you all at home. So you can come to the UK, but you can't come to London. You've got to be dispersed throughout the rest of the country. See, many people, and I can hear you, lots of you at home, many people will say, look, the issue with a lot of this stuff is people work in this country, they work hard, they contribute their taxes to try and access things like the NHS and all the rest of it. And then you see people piling into these boats, coming across the channel, being put up in 4-star hotels and so on and so forth. There is a reason that people are risking their lives and putting 6-month-old babies onto dinghies to escape from France. And that there is something pulling those people from the safe shores of France to the UK, and that I'm not sure is even fully understood what that is. Do you understand what that is, Matt?
Well, yeah, I mean, we give them things, we give them incentives to come to the UK. I think for the ordinary man and woman on the street, what they can sense is not just the unfairness around issues like housing and hotels and public services. It's what I've called a civilizational moment, in that many people can sense that the fabric that makes us who we are, the shared values, the ways of life, the trust, the solidarity, the cooperation, that are all absolutely central to any representative democracy, are becoming weaker over time. And we've seen this after October the 7th. We've seen it in the protests. We've seen it in the cases of illegal migrants who have been pouring acid over mothers and children. We've seen it in the grooming case in northern England and elsewhere. We've seen it time and time again where British people are looking and seeing the blatant disregard of their values and ways of life. And I think the British people have clearly had enough. That's why Nigel Farage and Reform are doing well at the moment. And this is about who we are as a community. Do we have a shared sense of values, collective memory, history and identity, or do we not? And I think many people want to say, yes, we do, and we want to defend that.
I think you try and defend some values and all the rest of it in this country, and God, I'll give it about 2 seconds before the name calling commences. Look, I want to try and just ask you about something else. Merseyside Police Force have now apologised for what it describes as historical ill treatment of the LGBTQ+ community. I've got to say that the 18th force to have done this. Is this the right move, do you think, Stella?
Isn't this wonderful that the British police is so open-minded, and that in the UK you have such open-minded liberal culture where you can look at your history with a critical eye and say, you know what, it was wrong for us to criminalise gay men, gay people. It was wrong for us to not let people be the sexuality that they are. And we are going to acknowledge that, and we're going to apologise. And it's a very nice symbolic moment, which, in my opinion, celebrates the best of British values.
Do you agree with that?
I want the police to be politically neutral. I want them to be independent. I want them to be objective, and I don't want them being dragged into political debates. I think all institutions act within the context of their time. And we, as a society, as a culture today, have become utterly obsessed with revising and reframing history around the values of our time. And we talk endlessly about what is wrong with our society, what is wrong with our past, what is wrong with our history, and we talk much less about what we got right in our past, what we got right in our history. And look at, on a day like D-Day is a good example. You know, the fact that 58% of Gen Z Zoomers, 18 to 29-year-olds, say they don't really know anything about D-Day. Well, I wonder how many of those kids can say what was wrong with Britain's empire and how we were involved in racism and discrimination and prejudice. I bet it's probably another high number. I just don't think we've got the balance right in how we talk about our history and our culture. And I think with the police especially, Michelle, there are people out there watching this show who don't want to see police officers taking the knee for Black Lives Matter, who don't want to see police officers wearing rainbow lanyards, who don't want to see the police as an institution aligning itself with socially liberal values. That is a belief system. It is a belief system. It's not a neutral position. They don't want to walk into the NHS and see socially liberal, progressive symbols being thrown at them, or gender ideology, as a Cass review showed. The institutions basically become too politicised. They should be neutral, objective, and they should be very, very independent of political debates.
I'd love to know if you are in the LGBTQ, if I missed any letters out, it seems to change. One seems to get added so frequently these days, but the LGBTQ plus community, does this kind of make you feel better? Do you get this apology, and does it kind of change the way that you view the police or not? I'm really fascinated to hear from you on your thoughts about that. I'm actually just quite old-fashioned, really. I would just quite like the police to be focusing as much of their time and effort and attentions as possible on actually going out and solving crimes. One of my viewers has just made a really good point, which is going back to the first story of the day, which is D-Day, and saying, Michelle, why do more young people not have these kind of veterans as their role models? Because if you were to ask young people, they want to be influencers or this, that and the other, why do you think that is then? I'll throw that back to you. You can ponder it overnight, because there was mentions, wasn't there, about some kind of national service being brought in by the Tories. Many people absolutely almost spontaneously combusted at the notion of that, didn't they? Do you remember that one? Maybe that is the policy that we need in this country or not. We shall ponder that perhaps a little bit more on another day. But look, that is all I've got time for. Thank you very much to my panel for your company. And very importantly, thank you to each and every single one of you at home, wherever you've been tonight. I've very much enjoyed the conversation and your company. Thank you, but do not go anywhere because it is what was once the Farage Show, up next with Camilla Tomney. Night.
A brighter outlook with Box Solar, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hello and welcome to your evening GB News weather forecast brought to you by the Met Office. So some rain and showers around, particularly for northern areas tonight, but clear spells as well. We've still got low pressure up to the north of the UK, bringing various secluded fronts across the UK as we go throughout the rest of this evening. But looking at the detail, any showers across England and Wales will slowly fizzle out this evening, leaving plenty of clear spells. That's going to help those temperatures drop into the low single figures, and we could even see a touch of grass house frost in some rural spots tonight. Across northwest Scotland, though, there's a band of heavy rain making its way southeastwards as we go into the early hours of Friday. And along with this, we will see some quite strong blustery winds. So it'll make for quite a wet commute across much of Scotland on Friday morning, with that heavy rain making its way southeastwards, feeling pretty chilly in those blustery winds as well. As we look further south, we have got some clearer skies to start the day, so some brightness, particularly further south across southeast England, but also a few showers, particularly across the southwest, and they will make their way southeastwards as we go through Friday morning. That band of rain across Scotland will also make its way southeastwards into England as we go into Friday afternoon, fizzling out a little bit and just breaking up into showers as it makes its way southeastwards, but introducing a bit more in the way of cloud into parts of England and Wales. Heavy and frequent showers, though, developing behind this across northwest Scotland. We could see a bit of hail and the odd rumble of thunder in those, but feeling pretty pleasant further south with highs of 18 to 20. Now, if we look at what this weekend has to bring, a bit more in the way of cloud to start the weekend on Saturday compared to what we're going to see on Friday morning. It's not quite as chilly a start. A few showers to start the day, but generally clearing away to the southeast into the early afternoon, and further frequent heavy showers across Scotland, and that will continue throughout the weekend, but some uncertainty as we head into the new week.
Looks like things are heating up. Boxed boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
The latest GB News travel.
Good evening, I'm Johnny Ratner. There are long delays heading north up the M6 through the West Midlands from junction 8 to 9 midway between the M5 interchange and the Wednesbury turn-off. The two left lanes of 4 are still closed off where they're recovering a car transporter that's broken down, causing long queues back to Spaghetti towards Birmingham, back on to the northbound M5. Really slow on the M1 northbound through Leicestershire, junction 21A to 22 between Leicester North and Ashby de la Zouche following a crash that's now on the hard shoulder, still taking 25 minutes to get through. And in Somerset on the M5 southbound, the two left lanes are shut at junction 23 near Bridgewater. A van has caught fire. East Sussex, the high street at Lewes blocked because of the late night shopping event, and South Western and cross country can't run from Brockenhurst to Bournemouth because of a trespass incident. That's the latest.
You can stay up to date throughout the day by visiting our website gbnews.com.
It's the Great British Summer Giveaway, and have we got a prize for you? There's a totally tax-free £15,000 in cash to make your summer spectacular. Spend that extra cash however you like. You'll also win a brand new iPhone, Apple AirPods, and if that wasn't enough, a £500 voucher to spend at your favourite UK attraction, so you can enjoy amazing days out this year. For a chance to win the iPhone, treats, and £15,000 cash, text prize to 63232. Text costs £2 plus one standard network rate message, or post your name and number to GB06 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 5 p.m. on the 28th of June. Full terms and privacy notice at gbnews.com/win. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand. Good luck.
Join me, Neil Oliver, every Sunday night at 6 p.m. on GB News. And if an hour is not nearly enough for you, go to gbnews.com for special extended episodes online every Friday at 9 p.m, where we can truly get into the nitty-gritty of what's going on. GB News, Britain's news channel.
I'm Patrick Christie's. This is GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Michael Portillo. This is GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
We're proud to be GB News, the People's Channel, and as you know, we always love to hear your views. Now, there's a new way of getting in touch with us at gbnews.com/yoursay. By commenting, you can be part of a live conversation and join our GB News community. You can even talk to me, Bev Turner, or any of the members of the GB News family.
Good evening and welcome to Vote 2024.